Hey guys, it's Natalia and welcome back to Fashion Design 101. Today is not particularly fashion, but we're sewing and using fabric and our scraps, so we're counting it as part of Fashion Design 101. Arguably one of the easiest projects that you can make as a beginner sewist is a pillow. And one of the reasons I also just love making pillows is because you can use all of your fabric scraps as stuffing. However, if you've followed me for a long time, you know that I work in sustainable fashion and I do my best to reuse all of my scraps in various different forms, and there's a lot that just like can't be patchworked or like reutilized to create garments, and I've kept those in giant bins throughout the years. But what I've also learned from using just like, you know, small little scraps, things like this in my pillows, is that they're not very comfortable. So that being said, if you plan on actually using said pillow in any sort of way for comfortability, I would recommend doing half scraps, half like actual poly filling. I actually got this secondhand from one of my friends who was just downsizing a bunch of her stuff, realized she had extra. She's like, do you want it? Will you ever use it? I was like, honestly, I'm sure I'll find a reason to use it. So using half of this and half scraps is what I find to be the best solution, but you can also just use one or the other. As far as actual fabric for the pillow, you can pretty much use whatever. There's no real science to this. I feel like when it comes to pillows and things like that, you can have a lot of creative freedom. But personally, that same friend also gifted me this fabric forever ago. It's this nice Sherpa fabric, and I thought this would be really cute to make a pillow with, and because it is currently the holiday season, I was like, you know what? We're gonna make it a festive pillow, not just a pillow. So I'm also gonna teach you how to put some fun lettering on your pillow if you want to spice it up. It obviously doesn't have to be holiday specific, it just happens to be that time of year. It can literally be your name or anything else you want to write on it, but I thought that'd be a fun little touch to add to it. So for that, a couple of years ago for my fashion brand, I sourced a bunch of vintage Christmas fabrics and made like Christmas PJs with them. And I still have some bits and leftovers, so I'm gonna use that to like make the little letterings that go on the pillow. And those are all the materials that we're gonna be using today. That being said, let's get straight to it. As far as the shaping and measurement of the pillow, it can be whatever you want in terms of how big of a pillow you want. But shape, if you wanna do a square, if you wanna do rectangle. Personally, I'm gonna be doing a rectangle. So I'm gonna be making one that is 18 by 12 inches. So this is the 18, and I'm just gonna mark the 12 inches down. I'm using tailor's chalk to mark it to make my life easier. You can also make a paper pattern and use that to cut, but I find that whenever I'm cutting a pattern piece that is a rectangle or a square or something of that sort, sometimes it's just easier to draw it out. So here you can see I have my 18 by 12 rectangle. And now I can use this piece to cut out the second piece. So I'm just gonna put it on top. I like to use little pattern weights so that it doesn't move, keeps it in place. And then you cut the second piece. And now we have both sides of our pillow. I thought it would be cute and silly to put sleigh on it and make it a fun little holiday pillow. I made my own letters just freehanding it, and it turned out pretty decently. If you want to be more of a perfectionist about it, I do recommend getting on Canva and just like printing out bolded letters or bubble letters if you want it to be a little bit more standard. But I used these to cut them out of a Christmas fabric that I had, and this is what it ended up looking like. So now I can go ahead and put these on my actual pillow and kind of just space it out how I feel will be best. If you want to be a perfectionist about it, you can measure it all, but I feel like I like the look of it maybe being a little bit messy since my lettering is already not perfect, but I do want to make sure it's as centered as it can be. Moving all of that around. Now it looks something like this. To make sure it all stays in there nicely, I'm just gonna pin all of these down as best as possible. Depending on the fabric that you're using, it could be quite slippery to sew around, but basically what we're gonna do is sew all the way around all of the letters. And I will say, if you are gonna do any sort of lettering, it's best to use a fabric that isn't gonna fray a bunch on you, because we're not finishing the edges of it, though you could add like fray check to finish off the edges a bit, but just be mindful of that in your fabric choice. Once that is all ready, it's time to take it to the sewing machine. My usual stitch length is somewhere between 2 to 3, like 2.5, 2.2. But for this, I'm gonna switch it to 3.5 because I want a longer stitch. I'm gonna start over here with my S, and I'm basically going to be stitching as closely to this edge as possible, probably like a millimeter difference. I want to be as close as I possibly can. So I'm going to start and back stitch, and then I'm just going to go slowly, especially on the curves. Sometimes you might need to put your needle in, stop the machine, lift up your presser foot, and pivot it around, so you can get those more delicate curves. Once you return back to your starting point, make sure to back stitch, and then you can pull it out, cut your excess threads, and this is what it'll look like. I think they're so cute. I'm gonna go ahead and do the rest of the letters and then come back. Once you're done, it should look something like this. And now it's time to actually put the pillow together. So we're going to put right sides together of our two pieces. As you can see, the fluff of this fabric is going downwards. So I want to make sure that this side's going the same way, which means it would be going like this so that it matches that. And then we put it on top. And now I'm just going to pin all the way around. So now we're gonna sew all the way around, but we wanna keep a little bit of this open. So I'm actually gonna take this pin out, and we are going to basically sew from here all the way around to here and leave this little gap open. I will be switching my stitch length back to like a little under 3 because I still want it to be a little bit longer just because this fabric is so thick, but you just want it to be back at a normal setting. Like I previously mentioned, I'm gonna start here, go all the way around and end at this pin. So we're gonna leave this spot open so that we can turn it inside out and also stuff it. I'm gonna be sewing it at 1/2 inch seam allowance, which is my standard. And as always, you're gonna wanna back stitch to start and to end it. When you reach the corner, you're gonna wanna stop about 1/2 inch out, keep the needle in, lift the presser foot and pivot, and then continue. So now comes the fun part, but before we turn this inside out, I like to cut the corners a little bit so that when I do turn it around, the corners come out a bit more and they don't look so rounded. So just trim it down and be careful to not obviously trim the seam or get too close to the seam where it'll like weaken it too much. Once I've cut all the corners, it is time to turn it inside out. So I'm literally just going to flip it. And this is where you want to kind of like go at the corners and pull them out with your fingers. Make sure they're all out and about. And this is what it should look like. I think it's so cute already. And now the fun part is stuffing it. So like I said, I like to use half of a polyfill and half of just like fabric scraps that I've accumulated throughout the years. And that's exactly what I'm gonna do. If you have a see-through fabric, obviously make sure you use scraps that like kind of match. This one actually really doesn't matter, but I am just gonna use my beige and white scraps anyway, but you can really have fun with it. And this is a great place to reuse all the scraps from maybe the fabric itself. Like I have the little like corner ends that I just cut off, I can put those there. Little strips that I had from cutting out the rectangles, I can also just throw in there. It's a very circular project, or it can be. And obviously the amount you stuff it is also just dependent on how like stuffed of a pillow you want it to be. Like it's very personal. Some people obviously like things a lot more stuffed than others, but it's up to you. I like to do a good amount of stuffing so that it's nice and fluffy, and obviously feel it out as you're stuffing it and make sure that like if you are using scraps, they're like evenly distributed and all of that, because scraps are not the most comfortable. And I will say that out of experience making previous pillows that are just made out of scraps. I thought it would be nice and fluffy and it just was not. So that's just, you know, something to be mindful of. And when you're doing this, you also want to make sure to like really get into those corners and all the little crevices. Make sure every base is covered. Once it looks and feels stuffed enough for you and you feel like you have a good pillow down, now it's gonna be time to hand sew this little bit closed, and I'll pull you guys in a little bit closer for that. Okay, so this little hole that we have here, we have to close up. So basically I'm gonna take 1/2 inch of this inward and 1/2 of this inch inward and fold it into itself. I'm gonna mark with a pin kind of where my sewing starts and ends so that I know where to begin, because once you start working with these kind of fabrics, it's kind of hard to tell. I'm then just gonna take a hand sewing needle that I already added a little knot to. I'm gonna put it into the seam here. This is possibly the worst fabric to show you this with, but I will say the fluffier the fabric, the less perfect it has to look. I'm literally just gonna whip stitch this because it's so fluffy that you can't even tell, which basically just means I take one side and then take a little bit of the other and then pull it through. And like the stitch is technically visible if this wasn't such a fluffy fabric. I do recommend an invisible stitch if you're working with something where you will actually see your sewing a bit more. Honestly, don't make your life difficult if you aren't gonna see it anyway. So I'm just gonna keep sewing this all the way till the very end. And then once you reach the very end of it, you're obviously gonna want to finish it off, do one last loop, and then knot it, cut off the excess, and it should be a pretty seamless seam at this point. And that is the finished pillow. I think it's so cute, and I will be trading my usual long pillow on my bed for this one, and I think it's gonna be so cute. If you're watching this tutorial in real time in December of 2024, I'm uploading 12 tutorials for 12 days of Christmas, so subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss out on those, and also check out my previous Fashion Design 101 videos. I have a whole playlist of them. I did a bunch like 2 years ago, then took a long break, and I'm back at it, but I have everything from like very beginning, like all the basics of like how to thread your machine, different types of needles, different types of seams, to like how to sew an invisible zipper, to how to pattern things out for yourself. I have so many different tutorials out, so if you want to check those out, I'll have them linked down below. And again, don't forget to subscribe if you're not already so you don't miss out on the next ones, and I will see you guys then. Bye!